Hello everyone, this is Galip Dalay, Research Director at Sharq. Today we have Ustaz Basheer Nafi, who is Senior Associate Fellow at Sharq and also a renowned historian on Arab, Middle East and Islamic movements in the Middle East as well too. And we will be talking about Trump's recent infamous decision on Jerusalem, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. So Ustaz Basheer Nafi, welcome. Well, let's first start with the question. Did you expect this? Was it something expected?
I mean, to a certain extent, yes. I mean, like during the last few days, I thought he was going to do it. I mean, the American president. I mean, this guy is, as you know, is very unpredictable. It wasn't very clear, like 6-7 months ago, that he was going to do it. There were some hints here and there. But also, there were some doubts about whether he was going to do it or not. During maybe the last few days, it became clear that he made up his mind. And
because it's not Trump that is the first U.S. president who pledged before the election that they will recognize.
True.
Bill Clinton did it, George Washington the Jr. did it, Obama did it, but Trump made the pledge and now he deliver on it.
True.
So I think this was a bit.
Yeah, you know, in the American context, in the American government context, this decision is based on the Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate resolution of 1995. Both houses of Congress voted for the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel and for the moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. 1995 was like the beginning of the Oslo Agreement, the Oslo process, and there was some high hopes about peace in the Middle East at the time. The Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin didn't like the decision, didn't like the American Congress decision, and I believe it was done basically because of pressure from the American Jewish organizations, especially the AIPAC and some right-wing circles in the Republican and the Democratic Party. But in this regard, the Congress resolutions, the president is not required to implement Congress resolutions in foreign affairs. And that's why every single administration decided to postpone it on the ground of national interest. Every single one of them believed that doing so, it will hurt, it will damage, it will affect American interest in the Middle East. And also, I mean, I think most of the previous Israeli prime ministers didn't want that resolution to be implemented.
I see. But what do you think was the motivation behind Trump's recent decision?
I think there are the two sets of motivations will have to be taken into consideration. One of them is domestic. This president, domestically, politically, is not in a good shape. He's in a good position. I think he wants to rally the Republican Party behind him. He wants to preserve support for himself in the Midwest, in what they usually call in the United States the Bible Belt. But there was another, I think, aspect. Very few people talking about it. I believe that this president and his vice president and some of the very close elements in the administration around him, they do see that Islam and Muslims as a cultural civilization threat to the United States and to the Western interest in the world. They think in the ultimate confrontation between so-called Western culture, Western civilization, and the Muslim world. And They, they think that one way or another, they will have to put an end to this Islamic resurgence in the world. I mean, Trump knows definitely that there will be a reaction. I believe the State Department's national security advisors and CIA, they all know. I mean, they have people on the ground throughout the Muslim world in the Middle East, and they definitely reported to him that this kind of decision is not going to pass without a price, and maybe it will engender a huge reaction throughout the region. But he doesn't care, because his attitudes to the Muslim world and to the Arab world in particular is extremely confrontational from the very beginning.
But what is, at this stage, what is the practical, political, and the legal implications of this decision?
Practically, on the ground, not very much will change. The Israelis had already moved most of their government institutions, the Knesset, Prime Ministry, into Jerusalem some time ago. And Israeli attempt to change the demographic and the cultural and religious image of Jerusalem is underway. It was started decades ago. Expansion of the limits of the Jerusalem municipality has already been done. Settlements surrounding Jerusalem, all Jerusalem, have been built, and there are further settlements were going to be built, Jewish settlements. So in that regard, not much will change. Legally speaking, the Americans unilaterally have taken a decision against world opinion and against the international law. The United Nations resolutions, one after the other, United Nations General Assembly, all of them recognize Jerusalem as an occupied country. And the assumption behind the peace process is that the future of Jerusalem will have to be decided in negotiations, in mutual understanding between both sides of the conflict. This is a unilateral decision by the United States. This is against international law. This is against the spirit of the peace process, which is started by the United States, and the United States is the main force behind the peace process. Politically, that's another issue. Yeah.
But right now, I mean, we refer to major international norms or the major declaration was that the status of Jerusalem should be solved through the negotiation. So it was one of the big prize actually to at least activate peace process, which is non-existence in perhaps like close to 2 decades now. But still, how this decision will affect the trajectory of the conflict?
We know that Trump has made a commitment to reviving the peace process, and he's already appointed his son-in-law. There is an American official envoy who's shuttling throughout the Middle East during the last year or so. We hear the people talking about deal of the century. This is the term which is being given. Since this guy came from business circles, he thinks of the peace process or the peace settlement as a deal.
A famous Palestinian professor just called it the debacle of the century.
Debacle of the century, yeah, true. It's like, but no one in the region knows exactly what is there, what is on offer. The Americans are leading the process. If the Americans are going to revive the peace process in the region, then the Americans will have to make some proposals, because every other president who tried to bring both sides into the table in order to start negotiations and agree between them failed. I mean, Obama did it with Hillary Clinton, and then they tried with John Kerry. It didn't work. So many people think that Trump administration eventually will present some kind of proposals, both sides, which will be the basis for negotiations. What exactly are going to propose is not very clear. Some hints has been in circulations in some Arab capitals, in Riyadh and Egypt, and perhaps in Ramallah, within circles of the Palestinian administration. And apparently, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas doesn't like what he is hearing from the Arab allies of the United States and from the Americans' envoys in the region. Now, with this decision, I think moving forward in terms of reviving the peace process is going to be extremely difficult. I mean, we know that, Trump announced in the day, Wednesday, when he announced the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel, he also announced that the vice president would be traveling would be visiting the Middle East, and they had already informed Mahmoud Abbas that the American vice president would come to meet with him. And I've seen calls coming from all kinds of circles, Palestinian circles, asking Mahmoud Abbas to cancel the meeting with Mike Pence, the American vice president. So I think for example, we know that the American approach is going to be based on normalizing relations between major Arab countries who don't have diplomatic relationship with Israel at the moment. And from there, move into the specific issues of the Palestine conflict. That is now going to be extremely difficult. If Mohammed Salman had already signed up to this kind of approach, it's going to be very difficult for him, extremely hard for him now to carry out his promises to Trump.
Well, just on this point, I would like to follow up with another questions and partially responded. How this decision will impact the Israeli standing in the region? Because as you have seen in recent years, we have seen Israel normalizing its relation with particularly Gulf Arab states with no reference to the Palestinian issue.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, how this will have impact, what kind of impact will this have on the U.S. Middle East policy or U.S. relation with the Muslim world?
Let me start from the second part of the questions. I mean, there's George Bush, the son, launched a war throughout the region. I mean, he launched a war against Afghanistan, he occupied Iraq, he threatened Syria, he threatened Iran, and he even made a huge pressure on Saudi Arabia and Egypt during the first decade of the 21st century. It was like his war against terrorism, turned into a kind of a war against Muslims. And that's how it was seen, it was perceived by people in the region. And American position in the Muslim world, in the Middle East in general, deteriorated during the Bush administration, the two periods of Bush administration. Then came Obama, he tried to reconcile the United States with Muslim masses. He tried to reinvent the American image in the region. You remember the Cairo speech, the Istanbul speech, and people identified with him to some extent. He's not a white Anglo-Saxon, and he was talking, he had some kind of understanding of Muslim culture because of his upbringing. And he also committed himself to withdrawing American forces from Iraq. And there were, I think he was, to some extent, he was a bit successful. He was successful. I mean, for example, when Hillary Clinton cooperated with the President Morsi in 2012 to end the Israeli war in Gaza Strip. This was received positively by people in the region. Now, with this president, with this administration, I think things are going to back to normal. Things are going to back to people mistrust the United States. People mistrust American policy in the region, American approach to the major issues in the region. And that negative part of the American image in the region is going to intensify. It's going to, in terms of Israel, eventually, if we have a strong popular reaction, if we have a strong popular pressure on governments like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, I mean, all these countries who are like trying to start some secretive channels with the Israelis, preparing their public opinion for normalizing relation with the Israelis and having normal kind of diplomatic relation with the Israelis. They will be under huge pressure from their own people, and they wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, in the near future, it's not going to happen. Whatever speculations we have about normalizing relation between Saudi Arabia and Israel, I think now we are absolutely certain Mohammed bin Salman wouldn't be able to do it in the next year or two. Generally speaking, if you have an intifada, for example, in the West Bank, in particular in the West Bank, because there's not much contact between the Israelis and Gaza, but the contact between the Palestinian people and the Israelis are basically in the West Bank theater. Deterioration in the security situation in Israel, if we have, then eventually Israel is going to pay the price, not Trump. I mean, the biggest burden, the consequences of this decision is going to be borne by the Israelis.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Nafi, for sharing the time
Thank
with
you.
us.
You are welcome.